The body is so smart, though. If you take care of the basics, the body's going to take care of about anything else. So, like when it comes to K2, that does help vitamin D absorb from the gut. But if you're fixing the gut, like giving the gut vitamin D, doing your relaxation, creating calm, and all this, well, it's going to help your good bacterial numbers start going up in the gut. Well, the good bacteria make K2. So we don't tend to use D3K2 because we're healing the gut. The microbiome is improving. Well, your good bacteria just make K2 by themselves. And serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitter, and GABA, the calming neurotransmitter, and melatonin, and the short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, the good bacteria, they'll make a lot of things better. So we don't need to, worry about all those things because we just get the gut better. Your gut will take care of all the other things all by itself.
Welcome to Unleash Thyself, a podcast where we journey into the depths of personal transformation, spirituality, and growth. I am your host, Konstantin Morun, and today I am honored to host Dr. David Bilstrom for the second time, which is a testament to the invaluable insights and advancements in health that he brings to you, our beautiful audience. Dr. Bilstrom, a visionary in the realm of functional medicine, returns to share the latest breakthroughs and wisdom garnered from nearly 3 decades of pioneering work. His focus on addressing the root causes of autoimmune diseases and optimizing epigenetics continues to revolutionize how we approach chronic illnesses and overall well-being. And since his last visit, Dr. Bilstrom has delved deeper into the critical role of gut health in reversing autoimmune conditions and preventing future diseases. Today, he'll walk us through the importance of healing the gut, the diagnostic tests that unveil our gut microbiome's secrets, and the solutions that promise recovery, even from conditions like leaky gut. We will explore the necessity of supplements like K2, magnesium for vitamin D absorption, the benefits of Butyrate and probiotics, and even how everyday choices, such as our consumption of butter, wheat, and dairy, impact our health at the molecular level. Dr. Bilstrom will also shed light on molecular mimicry and its implications for diseases like Graves and Hashimoto's, offering strategies for eliminating common triggers from our diets to safeguard our health. Join us as we welcome back Dr. David Bilstrom to Unleash Thyself and get ready to dive into a conversation that bridges the gap between cutting-edge science and practical health solutions. Remember, it's not just about living longer, it's about thriving in the years that we have. Now, before we start, I have a small favor to ask. Please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement helps us continue to bring these transformative stories to light. And if you like what Dr. Bilstrom talks about and you'd like to learn more about his courses or his supplement line, you can find the links in the description below. By following those links, you will get the best deals, and of course, you get to support our show, and you have our gratitude. Thank you so much. So let's begin now. Hello, beautiful souls. It's my pleasure to welcome back Dr. David Bilstrom to the show. Many of you have sent in requests to have Dr. David back on the show, sent in questions. So we're sitting here today to see if we can answer as many of those as possible. So Dr. David, welcome back.
Oh, my pleasure. So nice to be here again.
Absolutely. So we'll start right away with a big question that came up from many, many people. We talked about vitamin D. We talked about butyrate. We talked about all these things that are important for us to heal our gut because that gives us the power to truly heal our life. One question that came often, as I mentioned, is around the silver component. You talked about taking the silver to help with infections. How critical is that in healing your gut?
Yeah, so the the intestinal microbiome, the mix of the good, bad bugs. You want a lot of the good, not a lot of the bad. Now, so many things in life tend to throw that off. Stress, antibiotics, Motrins and Advils, acid-blocking medicines, all these things will get rid of the good bacteria. And because it's a competition down there, if you get rid of the good, the bad guys have this opportunity to overgrow. And then that creates all kinds of gut issues, but also ultimately all kinds of all over the whole body issues, including the brain. And so you'll get a mismatch. Now, a mismatch is one thing, but then what can happen is that mismatch can turn into an actually infection, where some of the bugs that are in the gut naturally the bad dudes, well, they're not bad as long as their numbers are low. They're kind of kept at bay. But if they're allowed to really grow their numbers, they become really bad. We got to get rid of them with something that kills bad bugs. Or you can get bad bugs from the outside, like mold, yeast, candida, bacteria, parasites that actually get in from the outside. And then their infections in the gut we got to get rid of as well. And so things like meditation, doing all these good things, eating high quality food can reset that intestinal microbiome and allow the rebuilding of the good, and then they kind of push down the not so good, and then you're in a position to fix everything. But so often, by the time people get the chronic health issues that are kind of like bad enough that it's really impacting your life and your quality
Mhm.
of life, there's a bad bug infection down there. And then this is where that pH structured silver solution that we use is really great because it'll get rid of any bad bug, whether it's a bacteria, a virus, a mold, a parasite, uh, even if you're not quite sure which bad ones you're dealing with, it'll get rid of them, including, I kind of use an example of how it gets rid of any bad bug. It'll kill uh, malaria too.
Wow.
So it's like, oh yeah, it gets rid of all the bad dudes. Uh, it, it, so it really gets rid of the bad infections in the gut, including the bad infections in the gut because they create this leaky gut. Not only do toxins leak from the intestine into the bloodstream, get all over the place and create havoc and disease, but the bad bugs will get out of the gut into the bloodstream too. And then they start going all over the place. Some like to go to the brain and create brain issues. Some like to go to the joints and create joint issues. Some go to the breast tissue and increase breast cancer risk. Some go to the cells in the pancreas that make insulin and create type 1 diabetes, where your pancreas isn't making insulin. So it's that translocation of bad bugs in the gut to other body parts that create disease in other body parts. But this is what's great about this pH structured silver solution. It'll get rid of bad bugs in the gut, but if they've gotten out of the gut and gotten all over the place, you'll get rid of them out of those body parts as well and allow this healing all over the place, not just in the gut, but the healing everywhere else as well.
Oh, that paints a much more clear picture for me as well. That's beautiful, Dr. David. What comes up for me there to ask? So it sounds like this is not necessarily preventative, which probably could be. It's more because most of us likely have those bugs within our gut that now went to other areas that they've gone unidentified, essentially.
Correct. So, like,
Mhm.
I've been doing a real deep dive into what drives type 1 diabetes and how to be in a position to reverse it. So, there's a group of bad bugs in the gut called adenoviruses, a type of virus. Well, they're really big at getting out of the gut, translocating to the cells that make insulin, and then stopping them from making insulin. But also, they translocate to the breast tissue, increase breast cancer risk, all this kind of stuff. And so, if you have a healthy gut, it isn't leaky, those adenoviruses tend to stay in the gut, ideally in low numbers, not disrupting the gut. But that's when they get out of the gut, go all over, and then that creates all kinds of chronic disease elsewhere in the body.
Yes, okay. So I get the picture now because we most of us have a leaky gut because of diet and everything else, pollutants and whatnot, that causes those viruses and bacteria to go into everywhere else. And
Yeah.
we have them there we don't know. Is that then to say that we could get tests to see if we have them in other parts, or there are no tests right now to really tell us what it is, and this solution pretty much goes in and clears even if you had the leaky gut?
Yeah. So, in a perfect world, I always talk about it's nice to test so we don't have to guess. But
Yes.
the human body is so complex. Oh my gosh, it is super, super complex, but it's also super, super logical. So if you have the luxury of testing, great. But if you don't, well, that's okay. If we know the logic behind how this stuff works, we're probably okay too. And so
Mm,
this is where you can do a blood test to look for the specific bad bugs, infections that drive chronic disease. It's a classic sort of relatively finite number that are the classic ones creating all this outside of the gut stuff. There's also classic ones that do it inside the gut. You could do a digestive stool analysis where you take a poop sample, mail it off. They'll check for a lot of things in the gut, including infections. You can give a poop sample locally to a hospital or clinic. They'll look for parasites, and they do a pretty good job with that. And then you can identify the bad bug in the gut and then go say, okay, I got to treat this now. But also, you can do the blood work for it. So, like one of the adenoviruses, that's a classic one to create chronic disease, is one called Coxsackie. virus. They usually check 6 different kinds. One particular kind likes to go to the pancreas and create type 1 diabetes. Another type likes to go to a different body part. You can just do a simple blood test for a lot of those, including some of these adenoviruses. But truly, it's nice to know what bugs we're dealing with. But truly, all we really need to know is we're dealing with bad bugs that we got to deal with. And then this is where you're not really going to get rid of these guys with like a prescription antiviral like you might use for like a cold sore. It ideally will kill them, but the ones that we're dealing with that have creating chronic disease, they are way too stubborn. You just wouldn't be able to be on the medicine long enough before it might create issues to get rid of the infection. So like there are some bacteria, there's another one called mycoplasma that would respond to an antibiotic, but you'd be using the antibiotic for 10 years straight and still not get rid of the bad bug. You might get those numbers down, but they're just too stubborn. They surround themselves with biofilms that make it hard for antibiotics to get in, antivirals to get in. And so this is where you want to use what they call a broad spectrum antimicrobial, because they'll get rid of any bug. It'll get rid of a bacteria, a virus, a mold, a mycoplasma, a parasite, adenovirus. It'll get rid of all of them, even if you're not quite sure which one you're dealing with. But one of the things that makes this pH structured silver solution that we like is, yeah, it'll get rid of any bug, no matter where it's at, no matter whether we know it's there or not. But it also is really good at dissolving these biofilms, breaking down these biofilms that these bugs try to surround themselves with, so the immune system can't get at them, but also traditional antibiotics, antivirals can't get at them either, where this nanosilver actually dissolves the biofilms, allows the nanosilver to get in, and then just kill the bug. And then you're getting rid of the infections that are driving the chronic disease, even if you're not quite sure which ones you're dealing with.
Wow, that's so powerful. It brought up an analogy for me in my mind. It's almost like medieval castles. So it sounds like these bugs are surrounding themselves in a castle, and the silver is not just a catapult that breaks down the walls, but also the soldiers coming in and taking care of the rest. And
Yeah, and that's where you see like castles over the eons they change. You know, they used to have like a moat, but then that wasn't quite good with catapults. So then they'd have like a flat surface. But then when they got cannonballs, the flat surface, the cannonballs can knock off the corner. So they started making round castles that aren't as easy for the cannonballs to knock out. You know, so the defenses keep shifting as the offense keeps shifting. So yeah, so the bad bugs basically kind of shift to counterbalance the offense, what the immune system can do. But if you
that's
just
beautiful.
break down the walls, no matter what shape they are, with the nanosilver, you're good.
That's a beautiful analogy then. So because you keep seeing this in the news, at least I'm seeing it, where it's like, oh, we are getting more resistant to antibiotics, so they keep having to find different ones. And I'm not sure how true that is, but in the same vein, that makes sense, right? Because these are smart organisms.
Yeah,
If they can see what we're doing, they'll counteract because they want to survive like everything else. So logically,
absolutely. Yep, and that's where you got to use kind of these things that really is no defense for, kind of a thing. They just can't make a defense against this kind of thing, like the pH structured silver solution. It can't make a defense against some plant based ones. There's another broad spectrum antimicrobial that we'll use in a small amount of people. It's a plant based one called biocidin, and it's a broad spectrum antimicrobial. But you're basically talking about all these natural things that can do what like a prescription antibiotic just can't do. It just can't do it. But you can't use nature against nature. Got them.
that's amazing. I love that. So I know we talked briefly about this in the first part of our discussion, but since we're on this topic, how long have you seen on average that people have to take the silver or the pH silver solution to pretty much get rid of some of these, even if they don't know what they're trying to get rid of, but they know there's something there?
Yeah, so it kind of depends. The bugs that tend to cause chronic disease tend to be more stubborn to get rid of than the bugs that tend to cause acute infections where we get high fevers. We kind of know that. And so we share with people the 18 different ways to use this particular nanosilver. So if you have an ear infection, rather than using an antibiotic that would disrupt the gut, create all this immune system stuff, well, you can just drop in your ear, let it sit there for 10 minutes. You do it 2 times a day, and you're done after about 5 to 7 days. Ear infections, pink eye, the same thing. Sinus infection, we can spray it up your nose. I think I got a virus in my stomach today. I've got some loose stools where you can drink it. Well, you're probably done in like 5 to 7 days. But then when you're talking about these infections that drive chronic disease, then you're talking probably a good 3 months, sometimes 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. Kind of depends on how stubborn the body is. Now, as you're trying to heal the gut and heal the immune system, then what you're trying to do is get your immune system to start fighting the fight with the silver together. They get to fight together, and then that tends to get the infection gone quicker than just what the silver would do all by itself. And once these infections get in that drive chronic disease, our immune system is just overwhelmed. It just can't get rid of them, even though it's always going to try to get rid of, like a virus we might get when we get a cold virus. Well, then your immune system can, take care of it by itself. But you can speed it up with like this broad spectrum antimicrobial. But these chronic ones, they're stubborn. That doesn't mean that people only start feeling better once the infection is totally gone. If you take the infection, just start knocking their numbers down, you're going to start feeling better. Even before the infection is totally gone, you can feel great. But then when we talk about is, okay, well, you have all these health issues going on and everything is connected. So all the stuff you got going on as far as a chronic health issue is all part of this infection and all. So once you're like 80% better overall, take the whole kit and caboodle, whatever you got going on, you're overall 80% better, then we think there's a really good chance the infection is totally gone. So then what we'll recommend is go ahead and stop the pH structured silver solution, see how you do without it. If you stop it and go, hey, I'm still great, it's gone. And then hopefully your system is so darn healthy, they'll never let the infection rear its ugly head again.
Yeah.
And then your body will just take care of the remaining 20% of what you got to take care of to feel 100% better. Mm-hmm. Or if you stop the pH structure silver solution, you feel 80% better. If within a few days, maybe a week or so, you go, uh-oh, I can feel myself backslide and stuff starting to come back, then we had the numbers of the bad infections down enough that you felt really good, but not gone totally. They're trying to regrow their numbers. So we say, well, hop back on it, the pH structure silver solution. And if you hop back on it within a couple of days, you're probably going to feel really good again within a couple of days, but then hang in there for the remaining 2 months and then try to stop it again. With the ultimate goal being you feel really good, you can stop and stay good without it, and then you're good.
I love that part because we talked about that at length in the first episode, about the fact that everything that you talk about, we talked about the vitamins, the supplements, like the silver, like the vitamin D, it's not for life. Most of them. I mean, vitamin D, you and I talked about that being likely the only one that has to stay around for longer because we can't absorb enough. But everything else, this is not like a pill that you get prescribed where you have to stay on it for the rest of your life.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
then have to add more and more on top.
Yeah, so prescription medicines are usually taking care of a symptom, but not the underlying why you have it. And if you don't fix the why, well, you're going to need that bandage for the symptom forever, right? Or
Yeah.
if the why keeps getting worse, well, then now you need a second med to try to take care of that, where first one took care of it, like a blood pressure issue. Oh, I just have one medicine, my blood pressure is safe. Oh, crud, now it's gone back up again. I got to use a second one or a third one because the why keeps pushing you the wrong way. Whereas if you do these kind of things to get at why you're not good, your body is in a position to heal. But then now it heals and it's strong, it's sturdy, it's healthy. You can stop just about everything and your body just takes care of it by itself the rest of the time. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I know there will be some people watching this episode without watching the first one before beginning. So I want to kind of bring it back together in a way. So we talked about the pH silver solution, which is part of the solution, but by itself, sure, it can make you feel better, but unless you feel your gut or fix your gut rather, your gut health, it may not be a long-term solution, right? So we're talking about then going back to the vitamin D, the butyrate that you mentioned, and the probiotics, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. Beautiful, beautiful. And then, of course, there are other elements that we'll talk about in a minute. Perfect. So one question that came up from a few people as well is you see a lot online when they say, oh, when you take vitamin D, you need to supplement K2 and some form of magnesium to be able to absorb it. Can we speak a bit about that? Is that a misconception or there's some piece of information missing?
Well, I think it's easy when the body is so complex to make things seem very complex. And the body is so smart, though. If you take care of the basics, the body's going to take care of about anything else. So, like when it comes to K2, that does help vitamin D absorb from the gut. But if you're fixing the gut, like giving the gut vitamin D, doing your relaxation, creating calm, and all this, well, it's going to help your good bacterial numbers start going up in the gut. Well, the good bacteria make K2. So we don't tend to use D3K2 because we're healing the gut. The microbiome is improving. Well, your good bacteria just make K2 by themselves. And serotonin, the feel good neurotransmitter, and GABA, the calming neurotransmitter, and melatonin, and the short chain fatty acids like butyrate, the good bacteria, they'll make a lot of things better. So we don't need to, worry about all those things because we just get the gut better. Your gut will take care of all the other things all by itself.
That's beautiful. How about magnesium? Because that's another one that comes up a lot. And I know there's like 8 types of magnesium. Personally, I supplement something that a sleep doctor told me about, which is magnesium. I think it's rather than bisglycinate,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm pronouncing it correctly, right? And it seems to be that's the one that's working really well for me. What are your thoughts on that? Maybe in combination with vitamin D or on its own?
I wouldn't necessarily think I need to do something to get vitamin D absorbed better. You just use the amount of vitamin D that you need to use to feel really good, get your levels good. And then because the gut's disrupted, so many people will end up with vitamin deficiencies and will need to supplement with vitamins to put your body in a position to heal. Now, in a perfect world, what I'll usually tell people is, well, if we can get your gut really healthy and you're eating high quality foods that have plenty of nutrients in it, not the food like substances, fast food, highly processed food, they're not even food, they don't even have nutrients in them. But if you're eating the real food, the high quality, well, you're going to start absorbing all the nutrients from your gut into your bloodstream better over time. And you probably won't need a lot of the vitamin and mineral supplementation eventually because now you're just getting it all from your food.
Yeah, makes sense. Absolutely love that. And speaking of butyrate, we talked about that last time as well. And when I was on your website, and some people were sending this question in as well, there are different types of butyrate you have there. One is a sodium based, one is a calcium, magnesium, and I have the website here. That one is a complex. Can you tell us a bit about which one we should be looking at when we're starting on this type of program where we add vitamin D and butyrate and probiotics?
Yeah, thank you for asking about the butyrate. The butyrate is just an amazing central mechanism. So, once again, the good bacteria in the gut make things called short chain fatty acids. Butyrate's one of the most important ones. So, this is a naturally occurring, your body should make it. Historically, we knew it was really important to keep the gut healthy because it keeps away inflammation in the gut. And so, if you do testing and you're low in butyrate, for example, we would tell people, oh, because your good bacteria are not making enough butyrate, you're at an increased risk of colon cancer because you just don't do a good job of keeping away the inflammation of the gut. And then we're like, oh my goodness, this butyrate does a ton of important stuff, both within the gut and outside of the gut. And so it's very important that your good bacteria make this guy. But it's kind of a catch-22 because if the good bacteria get disrupted, they're not going to make butyrate and a lot of other important things. And then you're going to start getting in trouble. Well, then you may say, okay, well, I'm going to take probiotics because I know probiotics are really important. They're the good bacteria that my gut should have, but don't. So I'm going to add them back in again. So what you're trying to do with probiotics is build the numbers of your good bacteria in the gut so they can start doing all this work. And then eventually you don't even need probiotics, right? Well, it's kind of this catch-22. You want the good bacteria to make butyrate, for example.
Hey, beautiful soul. Constantine here with a short interruption. I want to just say thank you so much for listening in, for tuning in, for being with us today. If you're finding value in this episode and you'd like to support us, please click the subscribe button, give it a like, and share your thoughts in the comments or leave us a review. Your engagement truly helps us to grow the show and bring this important information to those in need. And if you have someone in your life that you know can benefit from this, please do me a favor and share this episode with them. And of course, if you are like me and you see the value behind what Dr. David is talking about, you would want to go check out his courses and his supplement line. And the links for that are in the description. If you use those links, you get the best deals and you get to support our show. Thank you so much. Now let's get back to the show.
Without butyrate, you can take all the probiotics in the world and you can't build your numbers. And so this is where you go, okay, we may need to use butyrate along with ideally vitamin D and probiotics so that we can build the good bacteria numbers and then they can eventually make the butyrate all by themselves, kind of break this vicious cycle. And so the butyrate is really important for the gut, really important for a lot of things, including it helps brains recover after a stroke. It's really great for lungs. So like children with cystic fibrosis or basically drowning on their own lung secretions, the butyrate helps them. It actually prevents cancer 5 ways. It actually kills cancer 5 ways. They're using butyrate, a little variation on butyrate as a prescription medicine for one of the worst lung cancers, a non-small cell lung cancer, where there's like nothing chemotherapy they've been able to find that does. We actually have a prescription version of butyrate to kill those hard to kill lung cancer cells. And so this butyrate is like, my wife and I did a lecture in Casablanca last year, integrative cancer care conference, and we were the only English speakers. Everybody else was from North Africa and the EU that was French speakers. So we had to get our slides in really early so they could be translated into French. Well, on my slides, I had this butyrate prevents cancer 4 ways, kills cancer 4 ways. And I go, oh, that's just, fantastic stuff, right? Well, about 6 weeks before the conference, all this data came out that, oh my gosh, it actually does it a 5th way. So I had to change my slides and go, oh no, it's actually 5 ways it prevents and 5 ways that it treats, including it might be one of the coolest ways of all. So I know I'm kind of going a little bit of a side road here, but cancer cells are defective cells. We tend to give them like this, oh, they're super cells. They're actually defective. And we can use their defections against them. And so human cells can use as fuel, so they can do their work, fatty acids that we get from either fats or proteins, or glucose that we get from carbohydrates. So we get to choose our cells. Now, our cells preferably like to use fatty acids. You can make a lot more energy for the cell to function using fatty acid as a fuel than glucose from carbs. But you like a choice, right? You use what you got. Well, cancer cells are defective. They can't use fatty acids. They can only use glucose. And this is where you hear things like, oh, if you have cancer, you got to cut back on your sugar and your simple carb. You don't want to feed the cancer. Feeding sugar is feeding cancer. So the 5th way that butyrate prevents and kills cancer cells, being one of the coolest ways, it actually uncouples a cancer cell's ability to use glucose as a fuel.
Wow.
Can't even have a fuel now. It can't do fatty acids, and now it can't do glucose either. And it basically stars out the cancer cells. You're like, oh my gosh, this butyrate is so cool. So historically, we've used the butyric CalMag. That's kind of the first one we've used. And we're really using it for the butyrate, not so much the little bit of calcium and magnesium, but that's just kind of the product. And works great, all this kind of stuff. But the butyrate, any word, scientific word with ATE at the end means it's an acid. So technically it's actually butyric acid, but it's kind of also butyrate. And so being acidic, it actually kind of stinks. It's got a very strong smell. And because it's acidic, every once in a while kind of bugs somebody's tummy when they try to use it, swallow it. So one Sunday I'm laying on the couch with our dogs, our 2 little cute miniature dachshund puppies. And I go, why the heck does that thing stink? Because some people don't like the smell, they can't take it, but also our children, the children that we see with autoimmune disease from around the world, we're so fortunate. We actually see children now from not only every state in the United States, but 21 time zones worldwide now. Well, the littlest kids that can't swallow capsules, we have to open things up and mix it with food. But this butyrate, the butyric CalMag, was so stinky that you couldn't find anything to mix it with, and the kids couldn't take it. And so I go, okay, so why does this thing stink? Oh, it's an acid. It stinks because it's acid. I go, oh, that's probably why it bugs people's tummies sometimes. So I go, geez, is it available in another form? And they go, well, if you combine an acid with a base, it counters each other. So if you combine butyrate, butyric acid, with sodium, which is a base, it'll counteract the smell and it doesn't smell. And I go, oh my gosh, that's fascinating. Is that available? And sure enough, it's available as sodium butyrate. So we wanted to use sodium butyrate because then we can open the capsules and mix it in food for the smallest children, and it doesn't stink. So even the adults that go, oh, I can't stand that smell, they can take the sodium butyrate, and it works just as well. And it typically just doesn't bother anybody's stomach like the butyric CalMag might do it. So some people can't tolerate in their stomach. They tolerate the sodium butyrate beautifully.
Yeah, I love that. And I was going to ask you, because I'm someone that does intermittent fasting quite a bit, and I still take my supplements. And I would imagine something like that in a fasted state probably can cause those tummy issues.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Right. Exactly. Absolutely correct.
Okay. And how is the complex one coming into the picture? The butyrate complex I see here.
Well, the butyrate complex is basically the butyric CalMag. It's a different manufacturer. And in a perfect world, we'd stay with the butyric CalMag. But the butyrate is so popular and so hard to get that we had to go with the butyric complex for a while. It doesn't quite have as much milligrams of the active ingredient butyrate in it as the butyric CalMag. So in a perfect world, we kind of like more of the butyric CalMag. It has just more milligrams per capsule than the butyrate complex. But either one is really great. The difference isn't huge, but there is a little bit difference in the dose per capsule.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. And I remember last time when we were offline after we finished the first episode, we talked about how butter seems to be a great source for butyrate. How much butter does one have to eat to get the amount you could get from supplements?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, so this is why I find it fascinating. I learn about butyrate. I'm like, oh my gosh, the only food source of butyrate is butter. And I go,
Hmm.
well, this is probably why every culture in the world uses some kind of butter. Now, in our culture around here, we tend to use a lot of cow's milk butter. Uh, we have the big state fair near us every year, and I love to go into the animal barns, the horse and the cows and all of it. Well, I was in the goat barn, and I think the goat people are a little peeved that the cow people get all the press. So they have this big thing up about how goats are kind of like cooler than cows. And one was that, well, more people around the world use goat butter than use cow butter. And I go, oh, that's
Mm.
fascinating. But then I'm like, oh, well, that's why like everybody around the world uses butter, whether it's cow butter, goat butter, or in the Himalayas, like Tibet and all that kind of stuff. Well, they use yak butter, and they drink yak butter tea 1,000 times a day. And I'm like, well, no wonder everybody. This is something that has butyrate. It's good for everybody. That's why everybody uses butter. I'm not exactly sure how much butter you'd have to do to take it, but we have some people that just can't take stuff and go, okay, just use a lot of butter, or maybe financially they can't afford capsules. Go, okay, well, just start putting butter on food after you cook it. Don't, like, let's say, saute at a high temperature all the time, but put it on food after you cook it. Ideally, non-GMO organic butter if you can, but that's a great way of getting this butyrate in, through a food source, even if you can't afford or tolerate capsules and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, lovely. So when you said, organic, non-GMO, I would imagine grass-fed butter falls into the category, and we know there's a lot of craze around that. And I've used it for a while now, and it's a complete game changer. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. That's awesome. So if we do butyrate capsules and of course supplement with butter, that should get us going. We talked about the PA silver. We talked about vitamin D last time. So anyone listening, if you're curious about anything else on that, we talked at length on that. We talked a bit on probiotics. Is there anything else around this area you want to touch on before we leave to another segment?
Oh, please, if you could. So we talk
Yeah.
about a foundational triad of vitamin D, at least a little bit every day,
Mhm.
probiotic every day, and the butyrate every day, ideally 2 capsules twice a day. And the reason that's this foundational triad is what it does for the vitamin D receptors in the gut. Now, vitamin D is so important. Every cell in our body has receptors for vitamin D. So cells have receptors for things that have to come to the cell, attach, and tell the cell what to do, or attach and go into the cell and tell the cell what to do. So you hear a lot about, let's say, insulin resistance, insulin receptors becoming resistant, and you can have all the insulin made by your pancreas in the world. It can't attach to the insulin receptors, tell the cells what to do. Cells can't control blood sugar, and all this stuff happens like diabetes. Well, it turns out every cell in the body has vitamin D receptors. There's more vitamin D receptors in the gut than any other body part. And when the scientists discover
Mm.
that, they go, wow, vitamin D must be really important for the gut if there's even more vitamin D receptors there than any other body part. But then it turns out they figured out that vitamin D receptors can become resistant to vitamin D. So you can have all the vitamin D in the world, but if your vitamin D receptors, like in the gut, are resistant, it can't attach and do the work. So they go, wow, this vitamin D receptor resistance, that is a huge central mechanism for all disease. But if you fix that, you make the vitamin D receptors sensitive again, it's this huge central mechanism of everything. Well, it turns out what you got to do to make that happen, daily vitamin D, daily probiotic, daily butyrate. Vitamin D receptors become sensitive. Now vitamin D can attach and do the work. They go, original data from 2018 was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what you want to do if you want to get rid of like autoimmune disease of the gut, like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and all autoimmune disease. But It looks like exactly what you want to do to probably fix about anything. Well, then 6 months later, the exact same researchers at University of Illinois in Chicago, give a little shout out because I went to University of Illinois Med School.
Yeah.
Um, their researchers are smarter than their doctors, by the way. So they go 6 months later, oh my gosh, this is a quote unquote nuclear weapon against metabolic syndrome, insulin and blood sugar, abnormal weight gain, heart attack and stroke risk, cholesterol issues, nuclear weapon against type 2 diabetes. Well, then a couple of years ago, Harvard comes out and says, hey, if you can get the intestinal microbiome to do this, build the good, get rid of the bad, and I'm like, oh, that's what happens when you fix the vitamin D receptor resistance thing. They say, well, you can treat major depressive disorder with it. And I go, oh, that's so cool. And then about a year after that, another study comes out, and they go, wow, if you can do this with the intestinal microbiome, it changes personality traits. People become more outgoing and more social. It has such a big impact on brain chemistry. So you're like, oh my goodness, this is so cool. Now, one thing that as I'm doing this deep dive to really figure out autism reversal and prevention, type 1 diabetes reversal and prevention, we talk a lot about people have genes for certain diseases that make them more prone to these diseases. So people have genes that will predispose them for type 1 diabetes. Well, there's genes that will predispose people to autism, cardiovascular disease, whatever. So it turns out that, like for type 1 diabetes and autism specifically, vitamin D will attach to vitamin D receptors. But the vitamin D receptors have to be sensitive, right? So vitamin D attaches to vitamin D receptors, every cell in your body. Vitamin D receptors then release a protein called vitamin D response elements, another protein. This protein goes to the genes that like predispose to type 1 diabetes, turns them all off. Goes to the genes that predispose people to autism, turns them all off. But you have to have vitamin D. You have to have vitamin D receptors that are sensitive. But oh my goodness, is this like central mechanism for everything, including genes that will be trying to push people towards diseases that they may have gotten from their parents, grandparents, all this kind of stuff. You can just turn them off as long as you have vitamin D receptors that are sensitive. Super central mechanism.
Wow. So if I understand correctly, then you can do this pre-conceiving children, so then the genes you pass down will have less of this turned on. But does it also mean that if you have, let's say, someone in your life that has autism, there's a good chance that by fixing this, you can also reduce the impact or eliminate the autism?
So what you want to do is get rid of why somebody has a health issue, and having genes that are turned on for a certain specific disease is going to be one of the reasons why you're pushed the wrong direction. Now they talk a lot about, yeah, genes will push you the wrong direction, but then environmental stuff too, right?
Mhm, of
All
course.
this kind of stuff too. But if you're going to try to reverse chronic disease, you want to kind of address all the things that are pushing somebody in the wrong direction. And so when we used to think that genes were hardwired, whatever we got, good, bad, otherwise, parents, grandparents were kind of stuck with it. Hopefully we got more good than bad, because if you look at your parents and grandparents, you're like, wow, there's been some diseases in my descendants. I don't want any of that stuff. Well, when they did, so that's where they decided they're going to do the Human Genome Project, where they're going to map the human genome, and we're going to figure out exactly which gene causes which disease. We're going to go in and zap that one, and then we get rid of that disease in a person. But when they got through the whole thing, they go, oh, this is interesting. Yeah, there's a few super rare diseases, like 50 people in the world, where they have a specific gene that causes that in this small group of people. We can zap that and we get rid of that disease. But for the most part, it's not what genes you have, it's which ones get turned on and turned off. So it turns
Mm.
out in every cell in our body, we have our DNA, a lot of bad genes. Got to turn those guys off. A lot of good genes. Got to turn those guys on, including about 8% of all the genes, 8% of all our genes in our body actually are viral genes. Viruses have gotten into the human body, put their genetic material into our DNA sequence, so the DNA would get read and make proteins that make us sick. We got to turn those suckers off, right? And so you turn off the bad, turn on the good. When you're not feeling good, it's because you got flipped the wrong way. You flipped on the good, off the good, turned on the bad. And this is where, once that starts happening, it's so easy for a whole bunch of stuff to go wrong in the body at the same time, because all the cells are being told all the wrong information by the genes being flipped the wrong way. So this is epigenetics, the things that influence gene expression without changing the genetic code, because it's not so much what genes you have, it's which ones get turned on and turned off. So this is things like meditation. Oh my gosh, it works through epigenetics. It turns off bad, on good every cell in the body. Oh my gosh, it's good for everything. Butyrate almost exclusively works through epigenetics. Oh my gosh, this butyrate is so cool in so many ways, right? And then this bile acid made by the liver that we use a lot of called TUDCA, it works through epigenetics too. Oh my gosh, it flips genes all over the place. So what you want to do, no matter what your health issue is, turn off the bad, turn on the good. So there are specific genes that will try to push people with type 1 diabetes, try to push people towards autism. So what you'd like to do is turn off those genes as part of the reversal of the process. Now, in autism, about 70% of all autism is actually one particular autoimmune disease.
Oh,
And
wow.
this autoimmune disease is where a confused immune system makes antibodies. Antibodies should be made by our immune system to kill bad bugs in our system or to part of the killing cancer cells, this kind of stuff. Well, in a lot of autoimmune disease, you make the antibodies, but they attack our own body parts. And in autism, they're attacking protein in the receptors for the B vitamin folic acid in the brain, for example. And these antibodies attack the folic acid receptor of the brain, knock them out. So now, even if you have the B vitamin folic acid, which is super important, they recommend that pregnant women take folic acid during pregnancy to help with neurodevelopment of the developing baby because it's so important for the brain development and the spinal cord development and all this. Well, you can have all the folic acid in a usable form you want, but it's not going to find any place to attach in the brain to do its work. The brain is like, oh my gosh, we don't have any folic acid. Folic acid is like, I'm right here, but I can't attach. These receptors are knocked out. And the brain goes, oh, crud. Without that guy, we can't function as we want. And so every human being, human beings are flawed individuals, right? Nobody's perfect. We're all flawed. What we always want to do is try to accentuate the positives of who we are as a person and minimize the negatives. And so with
Yes.
autism, a lot of brain stuff, we tend to think, well, that brain stuff, that's who you are as a person. But we wouldn't say that about another body part. So as an example I use is people will say things like, I'm a depressed person. I've always been a depressed person. I've been depressed since I'm a kid. That's just who I am. My parents are depressed people. Everybody in my family, we're just a bunch of depressed people. That's who we are as a family. And I go, no, it doesn't quite work that way. You would, if somebody said this, you go, no, that's not how it works. So if somebody were to say, I'm a right knee pain person, that's just who I am. I'm a right knee pain person. I've always been a right knee pain person. I've been a right knee pain person since I'm a kid. Everyone in my family is a right knee pain person. Well, you say that and it sounds so ridiculous, right? It's like nobody's a right knee pain person. That's just not how it works. But you hear people say that about the brain all the time. So the brain, yeah, things may run in the family where a bunch of people have right knee pain, but that's you're not stuck with it. We can do something to fix that. Same thing with this brain stuff. And so what you want with autism is, people with autism, there are some of the very smartest people in so many industries. Oh my gosh, their attributes, because of this brain thing they got going on, makes them the leader of these industries all over the place. But there's a lot of negatives that can come with that too. So what you're trying to do with anybody, whether it's a knee pain issue or an autism issue, you're trying to accentuate the positives, get rid of the negatives. So with somebody with autism being an autoimmune disease or being pushed that way by the genes, is you want to accentuate all the positives. Oh my gosh, their brain is so great at doing so much stuff. And then you minimize any of the negatives, which might be, interpersonal communications or tics or other kind of things that might go on. So by reversing any autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, the knees get so much happier. The joints get so much happier. Now you can be the person you can be, all the positives of your who you are without any of the negatives, which is all this joint stuff. Well, same thing with autism is you reverse the autoimmune process, turn off the genes that are driving this. Well, now neurologically, you have all these positives that are really accentuated, really optimized, and you get rid of a bunch or all of these negatives so somebody can really be this super great, super happy person, great quality of life, and oh my gosh, with brain power to boot to do these really things that a lot of other people's brains can't do.
That's amazing. And that goes back to the gut health, right? It starts there with
Huge.
everything we talked about.
Yep. The gut, that's why they talk a lot about that gut brain connection. The gut's the second brain. Well, actually,
Yes,
it kind of turns
yes.
out more the gut's the first brain because when a woman's pregnant with a child, the gut is develops first. the immune
Mm.
system that surrounds the gut next, the neurologic system of the gut next, and then it's the gut, the neurologic system of the gut, and the immune system surrounding the gut that drives brain development. But truly, the gut's the first brain, and if it's all set up well, it makes a really healthy, nice brain that then keeps going for a good 80 to 100 years.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know when you and I were talking briefly about this offline last time, you also mentioned that proteins, especially animal proteins, have something to do with this as well. Can we dive a bit into that? I know you mentioned cow and camel,
Ah, yeah.
as right, and it's like, oh, camel, and it's interesting. I'll let you tell the story
Oh,
because it was beautiful.
you are a good listener and a good educator because I learned a lot about you and we were talking from you too. So this is where the science is. I was fascinating. So every autoimmune disease is part of a big. They're all the same basically. It's not hundreds of different kinds. We're all just one disease that can attack any
Yeah.
body part, but each one has their unique qualities. And so when it comes to the 70% of autism being driven by one particular autoimmune disease, we have this thing called molecular mimicry. So there are proteins that may come into the human body from the outside that are super similar to the proteins already within us. Now, when things come in from the outside, could be an infection, could be a food, that kind of thing. Our immune system has to figure out whether this thing coming in, this protein, is friend or foe. Is it our enemy? Is it our friend? Well, if it's an infection that comes in, like a virus, let's say, the immune system recognizes proteins on this virus and goes, "Oh, you're our foe. You're our enemy. So we're going to make antibodies that attack you and kill you and get us out." A food comes in, and we think, well, it's kind of easy for the immune system, the body, to go, "Oh, your friend, your food." But our immune system doesn't know right away. It comes in, we go, "Okay, we got to figure this out." Now, it should say, "Oh, you're just a food. You're our friend," but it can get confused, especially when that food protein might be super similar to another part of our body. And the immune system's like, "Oh man, I'm kind of confused here. You might be our enemy, and if you are, I got to attack you with antibodies. I got to go after you. But you know what? I see almost the exact same protein up here, and he might be our enemy too. So if that's the case, we're going to make antibodies attacking that protein in that part of our body." So a classic one is Hashimoto's, the autoimmune disease where you make antibodies attacking your own thyroid. Well, Epstein-Barr virus has proteins on it. The monobug on the protein is very similar to some of the proteins up there in the thyroid. Mycoplasma, the other infection I mentioned, a protein very similar to the proteins up in our own thyroid. Um, these infections come in, and then, oops, that thyroid protein might be our enemy. I start attacking that too. So this is where infections can drive autoimmune, but foods can too. And so in autism, the proteins in animal milk products are about 94% similar structure as proteins on these folic acid receptors in the brain. So
Oh,
these animal milk proteins come in, the immune system kind of confused. Cow and camel are the two worst. Goat and sheep are next. They're so similar, the immune system gets confused and go, "Wow, I think that protein on those folic acid receptors in the brain must be our enemy too, because I think this animal milk protein coming is our enemy as well." So it starts attacking those folic acid receptors, the brain knocks them out. So one of the classic things to do for autism would be, let's get rid of animal milk proteins. Okay. And if you can do that for between 3 and 13 months, studies have shown that the immune system stops making antibodies against those proteins and stops making antibodies against the folic acid receptors in the brain so they can start waking up. But now, as they start waking up, you're going to need some extra folic acid in a usable form because you want any receptor that starts waking up to have plenty of folic acid to stimulate
mhm.
it so that we start reversing this neurologic process that's driving all the symptoms of autism. And the B vitamins we tend to get from our food are not in a usable form. So our body actually has to activate them. So you hear a lot about methylation reactions. We have to methylate your B vitamins, turn them into the active form, or some of them you got to phosphorylate to turn into the active form, and now they can do the work. And so this is where like a lot of the B complexes, like the one that I love called the MTHFR
Mhm.
methyl complex, is fully activated, fully usable B complex that does all this work, including it comes with something called trimethylglycine. So trimethylglycine is a molecule with three methyl groups. It acts as a methyl donor, so it can donate methyl groups to the human body to do work,
Oh,
such as take the B vitamins from your food that are not methylated, methylate them to the usable form. Oh my gosh, B vitamins are so important. They have to be in the usable form. Methyl groups help get rid of toxins from the body. It turns fat soluble toxins into water soluble so we can pee them out, sweat them out, poop them out. And you have to have methyl groups of genes the right way. Methylation reactions are really important at turning off the bad genes, turning on the good genes. So these methyl groups are uber important. That's why cruciferous vegetables are so important, like the broccoli, cauliflower, kale, all that stuff, because they have a lot of methyl groups. They're kind of stinky and they have methyl groups.
Ah.
So what you got to do is use higher dose activated usable folic acid forms, but then you got to get them from the bloodstream to the brain. And this is where I'm like, oh my gosh, vitamin D does everything. So it turns out the blood-brain barrier that separates the bloodstream from the brain, because there's some things that get in the bloodstream that you don't want to go to the brain, infections, toxins, this kind of stuff. Well, there's carrier molecules in the blood-brain barrier to carry things across the blood-brain barrier. So there's carrier molecules for folic acid, so we can get from the bloodstream to the brain and then start stimulating these folic acid receptors as they're starting to wake up because you got rid of the animal milk proteins. Well, the carrier molecules for folic acid, blood-brain barrier, vitamin D dependent. You have to have vitamin D at the perfect amount and probably vitamin D receptors that are sensitive so that it can get carried into the brain. And so this is kind of the classic triad for the autoimmune autism is animal milk-free diet, higher doses of usable forms of folic acid, optimize vitamin D so it can get from the bloodstream to the brain. And that is a real big central mechanism. It's a little bit different than other autoimmune diseases, but really excellent at starting to, optimize the neurologic function so that you start getting all the positives, get rid of any of the negatives that might have been established because of this autoimmune neurologic issue.
Wow, that's fascinating, Dr. David. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And we went so deep. So now speaking, because we're talking about the animal proteins, we're talking about diet, and I know you and I were talking about my partner's disease, which is the Graves' disease, which is another autoimmune disease, and you mentioned the thyroid as well. And I would like to dive a bit in that for a few minutes because I know you talked about another disease, Hashimoto, which is also thyroid disease. And if I remember correctly, you mentioned that the body also has a lot of receptors for the thyroid, whatever the thyroid secretes, right? If I'm not mistaken. So can we dive into that for a second before going into maybe the wheat and the milk
Oh, yeah,
that
yeah.
can help if you reduce it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So the thyroid hormone in the neck makes a thyroid hormone called T4, and T4 is a relatively inactive hormone. Doesn't really do much. So typically, it gets released from the thyroid in the bloodstream, goes to all our body parts, and then our body parts, liver, kidneys, good bacteria in the gut, they're always part of this. Will convert it to the one that is usable called free T3. Now, for a variety of reasons, things will happen where the body gets a little confused, and the body parts, instead of turning the T4 into free T3, will actually turn it into something called reverse T3.
Mm.
Reverse T3 is an inactive form of free T3. So there's just T3 receptors in every cell in the body. It's one of the reasons why they call thyroid the great mimicker, because if you don't have enough free T3, or you got too much of the reverse that's going to get in the way of the free T3, it can look like anything. And so if we suspect there's some thyroid hormone issues going on, we'll oftentimes ask people to do this thing called the signs and symptoms of low thyroid sheet. So about 8, 10 years ago, I made a list of everything that can happen when thyroid's low. You don't have enough free T3. And it's like 100 things long. Now, we know so much more now. We did 8 to 10 years ago. I could probably do another 100, but we stick with the 100. We ask people, go ahead and circle everything on this list that applies to you. And the more things you circle, the more we're going to think, oh, you got something going on with your thyroid. And you'd be amazed at how many of those things people look at and go, wow, oh my gosh, that is so much of what I got going on, including people who go, I can't believe that's connected with that. You mean this thing I have over here, this problem here, is the same issue as that thing over there? I'm like, oh, yeah, I know everything's so connected, right? But if you fix it, they all get better at the same time. So with autoimmune thyroid disease, the confused immune system makes antibodies that attack the thyroid. Now, when you attack the thyroid and you anger the thyroid, it can go two ways. The more common way is you anger it, and it just stops making thyroid hormone, that T4, as much. So T4 levels start going down. Then you don't have enough T4 being released into the bloodstream, and the body parts won't have enough to turn into the free T3 to do the work. You start getting all these hypothyroid symptoms. Underactive, I don't have enough thyroid hormone to do the work. Or you can anger the thyroid and it starts making too much, and that's Graves' disease. So too little, because the autoimmune is Hashimoto's, too much is Graves'. Now, when you start making way too much T4 by the angered thyroid because of this autoimmune disease process, you have way too much T4 turning into way too much free T3. You start getting all these hyper overactive thyroid issues, and they can actually be life threatening.
Yes.
High blood pressure, super high heart rate. You can have a stroke, heart attack because of this. Your system is just super revved, and you can have a heart attack. And then a lot of other things can happen as well. And so the body's checks and balance system, when I kind of mentioned before about that reverse T3, you're like, well, why would there even be reverse T3
Yeah.
to get in the way of the free T3? It doesn't make sense. Oh, but it does, because you want checks and balances, right? So people with Graves' disease, way too much T4, way too much free T3, but then reverse T3 levels go way high to block the excess free T3 so you don't die and feel even worse. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
checks and balances, that's just so beautiful. Well, the reverse T3 is going way up, and boy, you can see some super high levels. But what you really got to do with Graves' disease is stop the attacking of the thyroid so the excess T4 production comes down, reverse and free T3 comes down, and then reverse T3 comes down as well, kind of a thing. Where in most chronic health issues, it's too much reverse T3 getting in the way of free T3 because most is actually too low. But basically, if you anger a body part, it's going to do too much or too little, and the thyroid's a great example of this. Now, one interesting thing that it took me a long time to figure out was, oh my gosh, the same thing happens in type 1 diabetes. So you can make antibodies attacking the cells that make insulin in the pancreas. They may start making too little insulin, which would be type 1 diabetes. But you can make antibodies attacking those same cells. They'll make too much insulin, and that actually drives type 2 diabetes because too much insulin production will create hypoglycemia, too low blood sugar. Well, that's not good. So what your cells do, the insulin receptors in your cells do, the insulin receptors become resistant to insulin. So that excess insulin can't make blood sugar go too low. Like, that's fascinating. Typically, historically, you always thought, oh, type 2 diabetes is you develop the insulin resistance first, then the pancreas makes extra insulin to try to tell the cell, try the cells what to do to keep blood sugar from getting too high. But it actually can work in reverse. You make too much insulin, just like you'd make too much thyroid in Graves' disease, and then the receptors for insulin have to go resistant to protect the cells from getting too low blood sugar. And so this whole checks and balance system is absolutely fascinating. But the Graves' disease, they'll usually give people medicine called methimazole to bring down T4 production, to kind of basically save their life. And it's really great. But if you don't get at why you got the Graves in the first place, which is the autoimmune process attacking it, you can go back up again, right? Because the medicine's just putting a bandage on it, but the attack still happens, it go back up again. Or people can get this going up and down. So they get Graves, they use methimazole to keep them alive, but then they go too low. They go, oh, now you got Hashimoto's. Now you're not making enough thyroid hormones. We got to come off the methimazole, and we got to give you thyroid hormone. But the attack still happens. And then they go back up to Graves. Uh-oh, now you're making too much again. And go too low, they're kind of swinging. So what you do is if you stop the attacking by fixing the immune system, fixing the gut, fixing the immune system, well, then you stop making antibodies against the thyroid. Graves goes away, Hashimoto's goes away, and now your thyroid's in a position to make thyroid hormone again, but not too much, just the right amount.
That's fascinating, right? And like you said, everything is checks and balances and everything is logic. So there is no such thing, at least from what I can see in nature and within our bodies, that doesn't have a purpose. So it's so beautiful to say. It's like if we see something that doesn't have a purpose, it reminds me of an anecdote from my own life where I had some issues with my gallbladder. I was having stones and I was having massive pain. And I went to one of my doctors and they wanted to take the gallbladder out. And they're like, you know what? It doesn't do anything for you right now. You can take it out. And my alarm bells went off and I'm like, it doesn't make sense. If I have it, then it must do something.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And other people will tell you otherwise. So anyway, it's a beautiful, I never took it out. So I should preface with that. I got it fixed otherwise. But I know we talked about this last time as well. And I think diet is such a big thing that most people have access to change to some degree. And we talked about when it came to Graves' disease, but probably it applies to many other things, is to see if we can eliminate wheat products and then any cow milk products, at least at the beginning, to see. I think you mentioned 6 weeks. Let's dive into that a bit because I feel like it's beneficial for many, many types of issues that people may face.
Yeah, and so when we eat a food proteins, we break them down to their amino acids. We absorb them from our gut into our bloodstream, and then these amino acids do great things. But then our body parts put the amino acids back together again to make new proteins. And 80% of the human body is protein based, hormones and neurotransmitters and cell walls, enzymes to turn this into this. But if we don't digest our food well, we might have these undigested food proteins just sitting in our intestines, just sitting there. Now, you don't want undigested food sitting in your gut. That's a bad deal. It's kind of like food sitting on your countertop that should have been refrigerated.
Ooh.
It'll go bad. You'll start getting rancid and putrefying, and then it makes these chemicals that are so stinky. Well, if you have undigested fats and proteins in your gut, they go rancid and they putrefy, making those same chemicals, irritating like crazy to the gut. But also, if you get the leaky gut, that intestinal permeability disorder, where the tight junctions that line the gut only let certain things in, like amino acids, vitamins, minerals, these kind of things, they get leaky because of things like stress, Motrins, Advils, antibiotics, different kind of medicines. Well, now things that are in the intestine that should never get past the intestinal wall in the bloodstream or get to the immune system, 80% of the immune system surrounds the gut, they should never get to the immune system, getting it from our gut, including undigested food proteins. So these undigested food proteins get past the leaky gut, get to where the immune system is, and the immune system's right there to go, okay, you thing coming in from the intestine, are you our friend or foe? Are you something good, nutrient, protein, vitamin, this kind of thing? Or are you not a good thing, like an infection, like a virus or bacteria? Well, here's this undigested food protein, and the immune system goes, you're not supposed to be here. You probably are our enemy. So I'm going to make antibodies and attack you. So we start making antibodies against these food proteins. And this is where foods then start to become an issue. That we start, it stimulates the immune system, revs it up. Then the immune system might start attacking another body part because that body part looks very similar to this undigested food protein and this other kind of stuff. And so wheat and cow's milk dairy are classic for stimulating this immune response. The body sees them as our enemy, and then it might start attacking other body parts that look very similar, which is all this autoimmune disease. So typically, we'll say, hey, you got this autoimmune disease. We know you got a leaky gut. That's just how it works. We know you got food sensitivities. That's just how it works. The food sensitivities that are most problematic are the ones people can't figure out themselves. The ones that people can figure out themselves are what they call the immediate hypersensitivity reaction to foods. Better than any test we have. The tests that usually get run for foods are the ones where they do a little prick test on your back, your arm, or a blood test. Well, those are pretty unreliable. Now, they're a great way to test for things like cat dander and pollen and those kind of things, but not so much for food sensitivities, because they'll kind of go, oh, you look really sensitive on this pinprick test to this food. It must make you feel sick every time you eat it. People go, no, never. Or they'll go, oh, you're okay with this food. And they'll go, that's really weird because every time I eat it, I feel crummy. So with the immediate hypersensitivities to food proteins, and it can be other things too. It can be like food sugars too. So like lactose is a very common one for people to get sensitive. Geez, every time I eat that, I just don't feel good. People can figure those foods out themselves. The delayed hypersensitivity foods can bug us is only the food proteins. But what happens is they call it a delayed reaction because the food protein comes in and only days later or up to a month later, all of a sudden it whacks you with inflammation production. The proteins keep circulating in your system long after you've eaten it. So you may not have even eaten enough food for an entire month. The proteins are still circulating in your system. All of a sudden, whack. Wow. Then the inflammation starts building because you're eating foods that bug you every time you do it. Build. Man, I'm feeling really crummy here. I got all this inflammation. Something's causing this inflammation. It's got to be something. But one thing I know, it's not what foods I'm eating because nothing makes me feel sick. Well, it doesn't make you feel sick in the obvious way. The immediate hypersensitivity reaction is the delayed one. So this is where if you got an autoimmune thing, we know people have developed this delayed hypersensitivity to the proteins in wheat, 62 different kinds, gluten's one, and cow's milk dairy. Butter's okay because butter's 99.99% fat, not protein, and it's got butyrate in it, a short chain fatty acid. It's great for the gut and everything else. So we usually say, hey, if you got an autoimmune thing, let's get rid of these two types of food proteins. And if you're a ton better by 6 weeks, 8 weeks, those are the only ones bugging you. If you come back and go, you may a little better, but maybe not a ton, we go, okay, well, we still know they're bugging you. That's just how it works. But now you probably have other foods bothering you too in the sneaky manner. And then we can either test for that with what they call a food sensitivity test, a little finger prick test, the one we use, but one that's actually available online for people nowadays that can do it themselves. We'll test for 96 different foods. So you can pinpoint exactly which ones are bugging you how much. Then you
Wow.
go, oh, okay. So now I'll get rid of these temporarily because you can fix them. But once you've gotten rid of the foods that are bugging you the sneaky way, and don't eat the ones that make you feel sick right away either, well, now you've opened up this window of opportunity to fix everything, including once you feel really good, there's a good chance you fix these food sensitivities, the leaky guts fixed, all this kind of stuff. And so it's kind of like when we talked about that pH structured silver solution, when you get to be like 80% better overall, we're thinking the infections are gone. Let's try to stop the silver, see if you feel great without it. If you do, great. If you don't, hop back on for 2 months and try again. Keep doing it until you feel great without it. Well, the same thing with these foods is once you get like 80% better, we're thinking there's a good chance you fix these foods. Then we can start bringing them back in one at a time, but you got to do it in a special way where you can't just eat it once and go, hey, that didn't make me feel sick. I must be okay with that food now. Well, that's not how it bugged you originally. It was a
Yes.
sneaky way. So what you got to do is what they call a formal food challenge. One food per week. You pick whatever food you want to do first, second, or third, whatever. You eat it twice a day, 3 days straight, and then you stop for the next 4 days. And you see how the week goes. And if the week is like, oh my goodness, I'm still feeling fine, even though I just did that, you fix the food, eat all you want. If you don't feel well, that could be really anything. I'm tired, headache, whatever it could be. You go, oh, okay, well, I haven't fully reset this. I have my date. I had the food I tried this week. I had what happened. I'm going to get rid of it again, but I'm going to circle back 3 months later and try it again because you just got to give the gut a little more time to heal before you might be able to fix that one. Then just do one per week. There's a good chance you can fix anything, including the dairy. You can even fix the dairy eventually, even though inherently is one of the ones that bugged you. Now, there's a couple other health issues where we know something's bugging somebody. So if somebody has enough brain stuff to get in the way of stuff, whatever it is, memory, concentration, depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, migraine, seizures, whatever it is, we know there's a weed issue. If you're somebody that gets recurrent canker sores in your mouth, you got a weed issue. If you're an adult with some kind of acne, even a little bit, you got a weed issue. If you're a teenager with moderate to severe acne, we know you got a wheat. And just about everyone has cow's milk dairy, but not everyone. And so if you got those kind of things, you go, oh, well, just like an autoimmune disease, I'll get rid of this one or these two. But if I'm not a lot better in 6 to 8 weeks, I'll check and see what other foods are bugging me with that test, get rid of them temporarily, open up the window of opportunity to fix everything, including can fix those foods eventually.
That's fascinating. And you answered a couple of my follow-up questions I would have there. So you mentioned gluten is one of the proteins. So it's not enough to just be, I'm going to go gluten-free. It's eliminating all the wheat. Is all the wheat inclusive of things like rye and other types of grains? So when we say wheat-free, it's like grain-free almost?
Yeah, there are some grains that are not wheat grains, and they don't contain
Yeah.
gluten in them too. And so, yeah, grains are an interesting one for humans. Inherently, they tend to create inflammation, and inherently, they tend to require our immune system to kind of figure out whether this could be okay. So, as I was doing this deep dive in the type 1 diabetes, they talk a lot about how you're much more likely to develop this autoantibody, antibodies that attack our own body parts, depending on when you introduce grains. And so you don't want to introduce them before 4 months in a newborn, but you don't want to wait longer than 7 months. There's kind of this window of opportunity where
Mm.
you bring grains in and the immune system is in a place where it can deal with it, learn, and then you tend to be okay with grains and you don't tend to have grains create this autoimmune process over the years based on when you bring them in. Body's got to kind of deal with it. And you kind of think about like wheat and other grains is historically humans have been hunter-gatherer societies.
Yes.
And small communities, you have to keep moving though, because you could, deplete the food supply in an area. So you got to move to a different place and then come back eventually to that same place again. But if we could have a lot of people in the same place, we had to start, producing foods at high volume, and grains were a great one for that, like wheat. You could sustain an entire population by what you grew, but that's not how our body was really put together. So all these grains, like wheat proteins, just inherently create a little bit of inflammation in the gut, just always. Human body's great. little bit of inflammation, we deal with it. We stub our toe, inflammation, it hurts, we fix it in a couple of minutes. We always are dealing with inflammation. Cut ourselves, we heal it. But some people just can't get rid of inflammation very well for a variety of other reasons, like we talk about to drive chronic disease. And that inflammation, rather than it hits us with wheat and we fix it even before the next time we eat wheat, it hits us, creates inflammation, but we don't clear it all the way. Next time we eat it, creates inflammation, it builds. You just can't get rid of it. It builds over time, then it drives chronic disease. So even though ideally you're in a position to fix all foods, once you heal the leaky gut, fix whatever problem you got, with the autoimmune folks, we're kind of like, well, you may want to stay away from wheat, even though you can pick your spots. If you got a hot date with your spouse or girlfriend, well, pick your spots. Don't waste it on fast food. Go to a great meal, great bread, great pasta. You can cheat periodically. Just don't do it all the time because you don't need something creating inflammation in the gut every time you eat it and taking a chance that it's going to start building again, start hurting the gut, and then hurt the immune system and try to drag back in this autoimmune process. You fix any
Yeah.
other food, including the British Journal of Medicine in 1961 said, oh, people with celiac, wheat is like battery acid bad. You got to get rid of it, gluten and wheat. Got to get rid of cow's milk dairy too, though, but you can fix the dairy part. Now, the reason those two go together is the proteins in cow's milk dairy are so similar to the proteins in wheat. That's just like molecular mimicry. So when the wheat proteins start creating issues, the cow's milk dairy proteins are so similar, your body starts hating them and making antibodies against them too. So
Yeah,
that's why they kind of
exactly.
go together because once again, the proteins are so similar, even though it seems like they should be a lot different.
And if I remember correctly, you said that most people doing something like this, they could start to see benefits 6 to 8 weeks later, and if they don't, that means that they might have another type of irritant that they have to test for.
Another food bothering them besides the one that you might know inherently because of what your symptoms are. Yep.
Makes
That's
so
where
much
the
sense.
testing
Wow.
comes in really nice because it really allows you to pinpoint what's going on and then you know exactly what to get rid of and what you don't need to get rid of. But then you should be in a position to reset that and they don't bug you long term.
Yeah, because we talked about testing earlier as well. Like if someone has the opportunity to test before, they can literally see how all these things that you talked about literally help to reverse
Yes.
situations because you can test as often as you need to or as your funds allow to.
Well, usually
That's
with
very
the
good
food
testing.
sensitivity test, you don't want to you don't need to retest it. It's one and done, because if you avoid the
Oh,
food well, the numbers go down. So if you repeat the test and your numbers are down of the foods you've been avoiding, you're not sure if they're down just because you did such a good job avoiding them, or truly if you reset the sensitivity. So this is where usually if you can pay for the first test, you're good. And then we go, okay, well now just do these formal food challenges one at a time, and your body gets to tell you whether you fixed it or not. Yeah.
that's
So it's another
amazing.
one. You don't really
That's,
need to retest. Your body will tell you what you need to know eventually when you bring it back in.
that's so beautiful. So many directions we can go here. I have one last question I have written down here because I know it's going to be important for some people. It's something you mentioned offline last time, how 80% of people that actually have autoimmune disease are female. And that fascinated me. Like, okay, so not everything is equal between all of us. Can we dive into that as to why that's the case and what someone can do different beyond what we just talked about? If there is anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. There's two major reasons why they think women uh, get so much of the autoimmune disease. So one of the big ones is a hormone imbalance called estrogen dominance. Too much estrogen compared to progesterone. So hormones, all vitally important. We talked about thyroid. Oh my gosh, estrogen is so important. In women, estrogen prevents heart attacks and prevents strokes, prevents cataracts, prevents macular degeneration, prevents osteoporosis, prevents gut issues, even prevents fine lines and wrinkles on their skin. Oh my gosh, so important. But the balance, a lot of times, of hormones is almost more important than one or the other. So you want this really perfect balance between the estrogens and progesterones in women. Estrogen dominance, oh my goodness, I call this the most dangerous disease in women because there's so much more than just autoimmune disease or cancer too. So this is where we talk about cancer as a flip side of the same coin as autoimmune disease. So in women, this estrogen dominance will drive all hormonal menstrual issues: bad flows, bad cramps, PMS, ovarian cysts, polycystic ovarian syndrome, fibroids, endometriosis, fibrocystic breast disease, infertility, all these hormonal menstrual things. So if any woman has any of those things, you know she has estrogen dominance. Because estrogen revs and progesterone calms, women get rev without calm stuff. Oh, I'm a worrier. Oh, I have too much anxiety. I have panic attacks. I can't sleep. All the rev without calm. So whenever you see that stuff in women, you go, oh my gosh, you have estrogen dominance. We got to get rid of it, because this estrogen dominance is one of the reasons why 80% of all the people that get autoimmune disease are women. But this estrogen dominance is a huge driver of cancer. So, for example, a woman with estrogen dominance before menopause, any of the hormonal menstrual stuff, any of the Rev without calm stuff before menopause, she has a 5.4 times greater risk of getting breast cancer before menopause. Doesn't double the risk of breast cancer, doesn't triple the risk, a 5.4 time increased risk of breast cancer before menopause, and a 10 times greater risk of malignant cancers your entire life. The cancers that start one place, which is not good, but metastasize other places. The malignant cancers, 10 times greater risk of malignant cancers your whole life. So we're trying to let people know is before you get to the cancer, before you get to the autoimmune disease, let's fix the estrogen dominance. This showing up as the Rev without calm or the hormonal menstrual stuff. Now, unfortunately, the treatments we do for some of this stuff actually makes it worse. And so typically when a woman has all these hormonal menstrual things, they're problematic. You can't get through your day, your month, whatever. Well, they put them on birth control pills. Well, oral birth control pills are estrogen based. So now they just made this estrogen dominance worse. So they keep going the wrong direction. And then oftentimes they get so bad, the women are asked to have a hysterectomy, take out the uterus, or one ovary, whatever, two ovaries. Any change in the anatomy down there makes the estrogen dominance worse. And so even though they may have a hysterectomy and they don't have bad flows, bad cramps, bad PMS anymore, their estrogen dominance is even worse, driving them to the autoimmune disease and cancer. So we want to educate people is, let's fix those things. Let's fix that estrogen dominance, and then all the hormonal stuff goes away. Let's fix the Rev without calm. Let's fix the estrogen dominance, all the Rev without calm stuff goes away. So this is where, like, if a woman has anxiety, let's say, you give them an anxiety medicine, like let's say Xanax, they may feel calmer, but one thing you know is causing the anxiety. Of all the things that could cause anxiety, one thing that's not causing the anxiety is not a Xanax deficiency, because nobody has Xanax in their system, so it can't be that. But it is something, probably estrogen dominance. But, oh, what's the big deal? I'm more chill. I don't have my panic attacks. What's the big deal? Well, you kind of missed this opportunity to fix the estrogen dominance to prevent you from this other stuff. Or insomnia. Well, I'm just going to take Ambien. Ambien's a medicine for sleep. I sleep better. Well, of all the things that might be creating this sleep trouble in a woman, a young woman, for example, could be a lot of things. Well, it's not an Ambien deficiency because there's no Ambien in the system. But it's, oh, what's the big deal? I'm sleeping better. Well, you missed this opportunity to fix the estrogen dominance. You sleep like a baby. You're totally chill. No panic attacks. None of that hormonal menstrual stuff. And we've done our due diligence to prevent you from ever getting to the autoimmune disease and the cancer risk. And so that's a huge one. And the other one goes back to epigenetics. So a lot of bad genes, a lot of good genes. Well, it turns out women have 2 copies of the X chromosome in every cell in their body. Guys have 1X, 1Y. Well, there's so many bad genes on the X chromosome that for a woman to be optimally healthy, she has to be able to shut down at least 85% of all the genes on the second X chromosome. Otherwise, you get excessive X chromosome influence on health or real health. So here's women, they almost have to totally shut down an entire chromosome in every cell in their body to stay optimally healthy. Oh my gosh, what a huge job that is, right? And it goes back to methylation reactions and other kind of things that we kind of touched on. So you got to optimize epigenetics. You got to fix estrogen dominance. This way, women get rid of all the hormonal menstrual stuff, keep their body parts, right? Like your gallbladder story, best to keep the body parts we have. There's always a downside if you take them out. They're so chill, sleep great, fix all that. Well, now we've really done our due diligence by fixing this estrogen dominance before it ever turns into autoimmune disease and cancer. So we've really done our due diligence to prevent all cancers and all autoimmune disease all at the same time.
Yeah, and that you can do again through the gut health, right? Bringing that to optimal health.
All the things that we kind of talk about we talk about the 7 central mechanisms. Gut number 1, yes. Cortisol's number 2, these infections that drive chronic disease number 3, the foods bugging us is number 4, vitamin deficiencies number 5, hormone imbalances deficient number 6, and then environmental toxins being number 7. So you take care of the central mechanisms, you're getting rid of cancer risk, autoimmune disease, but also all these other health issues because they're all coming from the same stuff. The gut's number 1.
That's amazing. Wow. Dr. David, fantastic. I could have another million questions for you because honestly, I'm just like absorbing it all, and I'm like, this makes so much sense. You know, when you hear things, let's say for the first time, because some of this stuff is for the first time, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And you hear many things for the first time, and it's like, no, it doesn't make sense. Everything you've shared to me, even though I don't have a medical background, I have a science background. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. There is logic and reason and purpose because what you're talking about when I take an Ambien or take a Tylenol or whatever is to treat the symptoms, never the cause. And then we forget that the cause has to be dealt with because we feel better and then we go on about our day. And that's that's problematic by the sounds of it. I mean, we know it from our own lives.
And this is where it's so nice that the body is so good at healing, because it can really seem daunting. And so often people are told if you got a chronic health issue, you may ask somebody, so you just told me I had this health issue, you diagnosed me with something. So why did I get it? We have no idea why you got it. And, oh, well, how can I make it go away? You can't make it go away. That's going to be forever. Whether it's an autoimmune disease, whatever it is. That just means that person doesn't know. They may be able to diagnose you. They may be able to use a medicine that's going to help you feel better that day. But then you really want to go back and do your due diligence and figure this stuff out and really trust in the inherent smarts, the knowledge of your body, because your body's trying to fix anything you got. Your body's trying to fix it. Your body knows how to fix it, but something's gotten in the way. And this is where you look at the 7 central mechanisms. Gus, number one, you fix that, you get the thing out of the way, and now the body goes, all right, I can fix this now. I've been waiting for my opportunity. Now I have it. And that's when you heal because now your body's fixing everything. It's really just all these things we're talking about. We're just trying to get your body in a position to do the healing that it knows how to do inherently.
To essentially do his job. That's amazing. And I guess one last thing I would like to ask you, we talked about education, and that's one thing you do so much with being on this podcast. So thank you for that and everything you do with your courses and your social media content. Let's talk about your courses. So someone like myself or someone in the audience that's super like, wow, I want to learn more. Besides, of course, working with you in your clinics, reaching out, there are these courses you've put together for practitioners, but also for lay people like myself that don't necessarily have a medical background. Can you tell us a bit more about what we can find there?
Oh, sure. Yeah, thank you. So, as Constantine, as you can tell, I'm passionate about teaching, right?
Yes,
Oh,
100%.
it's just I find it so fascinating. I just want to let everybody know, teach everybody. So, but it's really it's so important to people to know that in medicine we tend to use a lot of crazy, complicated words, and it makes it seem like everything's crazy complicated, and it's not even worth your time to want to know this stuff because you're not going to understand this stuff. But truly, it's all just logical. And if you don't use fancy terms, people go, "Oh, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I can see that."
Yeah.
And so we really feel strong that knowledge is power, and then if we can teach people the logic behind all of this, they're really in a position to do a lot of it themselves, if not all of it. Okay, because really you're just using this inherent knowledge that your body has. And so we have two different levels of courses. The one level course is called the medical bill detox, and we called it that because when you got these chronic health issues, it's one doc after another doc, procedure after procedure. Let's take your gallbladder out. It might help. We'll find out afterwards, and it didn't help. So then let's, all this and study after study, imaging, oh my gosh, it can get so expensive, right? Your medical bills just go up and up and up. So we want to kind of stop this. We call the medical bill detox. So it's a series of 7 emails. Each one takes a real deep dive into these central mechanisms that drive chronic health issues. Why are you not feeling good? And each is only about a 6 to 8 minute read. So it's not a long read, but it really dives deep. The very first one's about epigenetics because it's such an important concept. And then we have another one, the autoimmune hope course, because we want to give people with all chronic disease, but particularly autoimmune, hope, because they probably have been told, we don't know where that came from. We can't make it go away.
Yes.
We want to give them hope. And so it's a deeper dive into these central mechanisms of what you can do, but also it allows them access to I do a monthly Q&A session, and it gives them access to actually ask me specific questions that I'll answer about your specific needs, even if you don't see me in clinic as a patient.
That's
But
beautiful.
also then it gives them access to all of the Q&As we do, so they can listen to all the other questions other people have asked and all this, and really learn about this kind of stuff. And we're actually working on a third course as well now too, because we really want to educate people. Now, one of the challenges is you may have practitioners that you see in your part of the country or the world that don't understand this. Why are you doing that? Don't you want this medication that I offered you? Why are you doing this other stuff for yourself or your child? Well, we have the master class for medical practitioners. So we designed it so it's pretty short. It's only about 70 minutes. So it's not like a huge amount of time where your medical practitioner for free could go in there and go, I understand kind of, yeah, I got this now. That's why you're doing this stuff. And I understand it now, and I'll be happy to help you where I just couldn't help you before because I didn't understand it. And so we really want them to know why you're doing these things, and they can understand, why this is what's going to actually reverse the process and get rid of it rather than just putting a bandage on and then having that bandage as time goes on. And then we also have the autoimmune paradigm course, which is the advanced physicians course now. It's called the autoimmune paradigm being short for preventing and reversing autoimmune disease in a global mission. I had to work hard to figure that one out. They go, oh my gosh, this works perfectly. It's the paradigm. It's a new paradigm in a sense for that. Oh, this is going to work out. Oh, this synergy is working great. So this is actually a continuing medical education generating course where medical practitioners of all kinds, they may go to conferences or do online courses to gain medical education points that they can apply every year because you have to get so many to keep your license. Well, this is a CME generating course where they actually get continuing education credits for really taking a super deep dive into all these kind of things. Because truly, I feel strongly that there needs to be somebody in every community that knows how to do this. It's really great if there's one person in one university center, but if we want to get everybody feeling really good and get to them earlier, before it becomes, I've been everywhere, tried everything. I don't know what I'm going to do. Oh, I found one person. There's somebody in their community. They're going to understand that, we know where this stuff comes from. And, I know where to go to make them go away because that's what our community has. And so we'd like to have somebody at every community knows how to do this.
I mean, that would be amazing, right? I mean, if every GP knew about this, or at least some in the communities, to spread these, because like you said, it pretty much fixes so many issues. It allows you to deal with so much. It's unbelievable. So, I mean, personally, I want to thank you for what you're doing because, I mean, you educated me and our audience, but like your mission is so beautiful because you get to help people that work with you, but you're also sharing the information with everyone else that can benefit from it. And like you said, there are 8 billion people that can benefit from this. 8 billion people. Yeah. Wow, Dr. David. I mean, again, I could talk to you for hours. It's been an hour and a half. Time flew by. I don't even know how. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And then, of course, I know we're going to have another conversation in the future. So thank you so much.
Now can I say one more thing? Now, for the viewers always. That are watching this, you already know. The viewers that are just listening to this, Konstantin has a super cool T-shirt on that says Unleash Thyself. And trust me, if you haven't seen it, it is a super cool T-shirt. And I feel like you allowed me, Konstantin, to unleash myself today. So thank you very much. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And as soon as I make this available, I'll send you a few.
Oh, you're so sweet. I want to buy it. I want to support your efforts.
Okay, there we go. Perfect. We'll do exactly that. Dr. David, always a pleasure. Thank you so much. Too. Hello, beautiful soul. We made it to the end of the second part of our conversation with Dr. David. Isn't he amazing? Yeah, I know. He's one of my favorite guests that I've had on the show. I've learned so much from him, and he's tremendous. Following his advice, I upped my supplements, added some, and I'm feeling better than ever before. Wow, that's actually something. Anyway, I want to say thank you. If you'd like to show your support to our show, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave us a comment or a review. And of course, if you are like me and enjoy the content from Dr. David, go check him out on his social media links, which will be below, as well as check out his courses, as well as supplement line. And if you use the links below, for those, you will support our show and also get the best deals. Thank you so much, beautiful soul. And I can't wait to see you in this next episode that's about to pop up on the screen for those watching on YouTube. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, then I'll see you in the next episode as well, which will come up shortly. Take care.